Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Tech Showdown. My name is Kevin, this is my co-host Teddy, and today we're going to be doing a RX480 reference AMD RX480 showdown against NVIDIA's GeForce GTX1060, and this is the Asus Turbo model, which is basically the same as a Founders Edition, aside from, obviously it's got a different cooler on it, but in speeds and everything else, it's exactly the same as NVIDIA Founders 1060 or a reference NVIDIA graphics card. So this is about as fair as you could possibly get it with both of these cards on their sort of base model or their reference model, so to speak. So this will be very interesting. These cards come in at a very, very competitive price point. So let's get into the showdown and see which one comes out on top. Now first, we got to talk about the GPUs. So over in the RX480, you're getting the 14 nanometer Polaris 10 GPU, which features 2,304 stream processors. And over on the 1060, you're getting a 16 nanometer GP106 Pascal GPU, and that features 1,280 CUDA cores. So quite a difference there. Don't read really too much into that. It's more just me, telling you guys the specs of the GPU, rather than directly trying to compare the two. It kind of doesn't work that way. Let's talk about clock speeds though. So that is quite an important thing when it comes to these graphics cards. So the NVIDIA card will boost higher because it features GPU Boost 3.0, which is available on all the Pascal cards, whereas the RX480 won't. It's just set to a set sort of clock speed, and that's what it will go at. So the highest speed I saw the RX480 go up to was 1,266 megahertz, and by comparison, this 1060 went all the way up to 1,911 megahertz. So that's a big, big, big jump up there for the GTX 1060 in terms of clock speed. So that's quite a good advantage it has there. Now, TDP-wise, the 1060 also wins there. TDP for the 480 is 150 watts, and the TDP for the 1060 is 120 watts. Now, memory. So this is where the RX480 does have an advantage. So the 480 is coming with 8 gigabytes of GDDR5 memory at 8,000 megahertz on a 256-bit bus. And by comparison, the 1060 comes with 6 gigabytes, so 2 gigabytes less, of GDDR5, same type of memory, at the same speed, 8,000 megahertz, and on a slightly smaller bus with being on a 192-bit bus. So this one's sort of hard to say if it's truly an advantage. Obviously, more memory is better, but these graphics cards, as you'll see when we get to the benchmarks, kind of struggle once you get to that sort of 4K gaming where that type of memory is really needed. These guys will probably be more happy sitting at the 1080p high refresh rate and 1440p sort of mark rather than the 4K, which you'll really need that higher memory for and the higher memory bandwidth for. Now let's talk about the coolers then. So obviously they both have a blower style cooler. If you don't know what that is, basically the cards will intake down this end. They both have a single fan down one end of the card, and instead of blowing it all out into the case, this is all sealed. It will exhaust the hot air out the rear of the case. So this is very popular for people with, say, mini ITX builds and things like that, if you can fit one of these in there. Because it gets all the hot air out rather than it blowing around in your system to be sucked up by your CPU fan or whatever. So that's the main benefit of having a blower style cooler, and obviously both of these guys have it. They both have plastic shrouds around the cooler, and for the most part they're very, very similar in their design. They both take a 6-pin power. The only thing I would say that stands out slightly is there's a pretty hefty size difference between them. And also that the side of the Asus lights up, whereas that's not the case on the RX480. That Radeon logo doesn't light up or anything like that. But aside from that, very basic coolers on these graphics cards. and that's kind of the point, to keep the price down. So with all of that out of the way, let's go into the benchmarks and see how these graphics cards did. So I benched them. This is my first showdown with my new X99 Broadwell system. So that's a i7 6900K in there, overclocked to 4.2 gigahertz, and an Asus X99 Pro motherboard. So I haven't got all my benchmarks set up, but I got the main core ones that I wanted to do for this showdown all set up to obviously do for these graphics cards. So you guys will be really, really happy. But without further ado, let's jump to the benchmarks and see how these graphics cards perform. We're back. So that was quite interesting. A lot closer in some of those benchmarks than I originally thought it would be. Now, both of these cards are running on the latest drivers, and of course, the RX480 has had quite good driver improvements over its sort of short lifespan it's had so far. So quite impressed there. One thing that was quite surprising for me was the Dirt Rally benchmark. That is an AMD optimized game, and yet the 1060 just absolutely ran away with it in that particular benchmark. It absolutely destroyed the RX480 in the Dirt Rally benchmark, so that was really weird. Whereas the Rise of the Tomb Raider benchmark, which is sort of optimized for NVIDIA graphics cards, albeit it was a DirectX 12 benchmark, was very close by comparison, or closer, I should say, by comparison. But yeah, it's pretty much a big win across the board there for the GTX1060. So yeah, that's basically, it shows the difference there. In some of them that it was closer, but in others there was quite a big discrepancy between these two graphics cards. However, performance isn't everything. What about temperatures? So these cards both have quite a basic reference cooler to them, so they're obviously going to run a lot hotter than their non-reference counterparts. However, it's still interesting to see how they do temperatures wise. So for this, I did my usual, which is the Unigen Valley benchmark on the Extreme HD preset. I recorded the highest temperatures the cards went up to and the highest fan speed. So the NVIDIA GTX 1060 went up to 71 degrees Celsius at 43% fan speed, and by comparison the RX480 went up to 80 degrees Celsius at 42% fan speed. So very, very similar fan speed there. However, the RX480 was a full 9 degrees hotter running than the 1060. And will only sort of want to sit at around 80 degrees Celsius because of its self-imposed temperature limit, which is on by default, which is set at 80 degrees, whereas the 1060 wasn't being held there by a temperature limit. Its temperature limit is at 82 degrees Celsius. So for this particular card anyway. So yeah, there's a bit of a difference there, and I also saw a little bit of throttling on this Reference 480, which a lot of people have been complaining about also, but that should be fixed with the non-reference models, or if you do have a reference model like this, you can obviously put custom fan curves in and raise the temperature limit if you don't want it to throttle or anything like that. Now let's talk about noise then. Now, were these cards noisy? So reference design cards usually also have the attribute of being a lot more noisy than their non-reference counterparts, and that was pretty much the case with these guys, although the 1060 wasn't too bad at all. It was, you know, pretty decent as far as noise goes. So with general gaming, I definitely noticed that the RX480 was louder, even though they went up to a similar fan speed in my testing. Just, I think, with the design of it, maybe the fan design or something, it was just a little bit louder than the 1060. However, as always, I'll let you guys judge for yourself. Now, I apologize if there's a little bit of background noise. It's because of the pump in my new H115i has a bit of air in it, so that's the little bit of background noise that you are hearing. But these recordings were done in the Unigine Valley benchmark on the Extreme HD preset at the exact same time in the benchmark. So there you can see that, you know, the 1060 is just a bit more quiet. There's not a huge discrepancy there, but there is a noticeable difference that the 1060 is noticeably quieter than the RX 480. Which brings us now to the conclusion, and what do I make of these two graphics cards, and which one do I recommend to you guys out there? So as of right now, over at Playtech, you can pick up an RX 480 for $499, a reference one like this, and the Asus Turbo GTX 1060 is for sale for $509. So $10 more for the Turbo 1060. And with that in mind, it's just obvious. You guys saw it through all of this video for yourselves. The 1060 is the one to go for. I really wanted the 480 to do well, yet in all my testing so far, it's disappointed me at every turn with everything I've put it up against. AMD has had a shocking time with overhyping graphics cards. They did the same with the Fury X, and it's the same here. Now, I think it's going to get better. We've seen good driver improvements so far with the RX 480, and of course the non-reference models are really going to unleash it more. But at the end of the day, for this Showdown, the 1060 just runs away with it. It's better in every single way than the 480. It just beats it in every single area. The only areas I would say that the 480 has an advantage in is the fact that you can crossfire the RX 480 where there's no SLI support for the 1060, and the fact that you get 2 gigabytes of extra memory. But as you saw from the 4K benchmarks, they don't really do that well at 4K, so most people who are going to be playing games at 4K probably won't be using one of these graphics cards. They'll probably jump up to something like a 1070. So yeah, I just have to give it to the 1060. There's just no other way about it. It's just the better card, the better value for your money. You're getting better performance per dollar and overall a better, cooler running graphics card than the Reference RX 480. Now, I thank you all for watching this video. Please subscribe to Tech Showdown if you haven't already, and like the video. And as always, I'll see you guys next time.